Hey there. If you're here, you're already safe. You don't need to be anywhere else. Not now. Not for a while. You're tired. And that's okay. This story won't ask you to stay awake. It won't even ask you to listen closely. You don't have to follow. You don't have to understand. You can just let the words pass. Like clouds in a quiet sky. This is a place to rest. No effort. No thinking. Just being here is enough. Let go of the noise. Let go of what you did or didn't do. Let it all slide off your shoulders. You don't have to carry it in here. Slow your breathing. Slow your thoughts. Slow even your need to slow down. Let stillness be the default. No one needs you right now. Not the clock. Not your phone. Not even your mind. Lie back or lean in. Do whatever makes your body feel less heavy, less urgent, more forgotten. This isn't a story to chase. There's no twist, no villain, no conclusion to wait for, only gentle steps away from thought. Tonight's story is called The Woman Who Forgot Her Name by the Sea. She didn't know how long she had been walking, but the ocean didn't ask, and she didn't tell. The sand welcomed each step like it had waited all day. The sky offered no answers, only soft light. Her feet weren't heading somewhere. They were remembering how to be still in motion. The wind wasn't carrying messages today. No salt, no urgency, just air passing, like a friend who visits only to sit beside you. She didn't lean into it. It moved around her gently. It had no place to be either. Names are for places you need to be known. But here, no one asked. She hadn't heard her name in days, maybe weeks, and still she didn't feel forgotten. Only lighter, like she had set something heavy down without realizing it. The ocean didn't interrupt her silence. It whispered, sighed, and pulled itself back again. Each wave a breath, each retreat a pause. The sea didn't need to be louder than it was. Neither did she. She remembered the color blue. Not a moment, not a person, just the color. Like memory had peeled away everything but emotion. It didn't feel like loss. More like space, wide, open space. This wasn't escape. She hadn't run away. She had simply walked forward until the world fell behind. Each step undid a little more of what used to matter. Each breeze gave her permission to keep forgetting. She didn't resist. There was silence even with the waves. It wasn't empty. It was whole. The kind of silence that lets you breathe slower. That stays even when thoughts don't. She didn't fear it. She followed it. She had long since stopped counting. There were no numbers out here, just impressions in the sand, soon taken back. Even her footprints didn't want to last. She understood that. She used to carry questions like stones. Now they had turned to sand. What? Why? When? Too smooth to hold, too quiet to chase. She let them sink into the surf. The ocean didn't ask her to explain. It didn't need the details. It didn't even need her story. It welcomed her like she had always belonged. She gave it nothing, and it gave her stillness. The tide moved without noticing her. It didn't adjust its rhythm. It didn't pull back or reach forward for her sake. And that was comforting, to be beside something so eternal, and yet so indifferent. It reminded her that she didn't need to perform. She could simply be. She wasn't planning anything. Not the next step, not the next thought. The future had slipped somewhere behind the sea, and she didn't miss it. Forward no longer felt like direction, it just meant not going back. Her body was still moving, but the part of her that held direction had gone quiet. She wasn't going somewhere. She was becoming something. Maybe sand, maybe silence, maybe just air moving through time. The water had seen so many people come and go, and it had judged none of them. It wasn't keeping score. It didn't remember or forget. It simply received. She let go of her defenses in its presence. She once had a name, a sound people used to hold her in place. But here, the name lost its sharpness. It dissolved into the rhythm of waves. She didn't miss the echo. It had become just another part of the tide. The wind grazed her skin like a soft memory. It didn't try to get her attention. It just passed lightly, kindly. She didn't shiver. She welcomed it like something old and familiar. There were no clocks in the sky, only shifting light. No beginning, no ending, just a slow breath overhead. She looked up not for answers, but for quiet. And the sky offered only space. Thoughts still came, but they floated. They weren't sharp or urgent. They arrived like driftwood, unneeded but harmless. She let them pass without naming them. Some drifted back into the sea, never to return. She knew something had been important, but the shape of it had softened. It felt like forgetting a dream you were never meant to remember. She smiled without reason. Not knowing had become a kind of freedom. There was no point to reach, no destination waiting for her arrival. Just a line of endless beach. The journey itself began to feel like the answer, and that made the walking lighter. The sea didn't close around her, stayed wide, open, calm, like a friend with space for silence. She found herself relaxing more with every wave, like she was being held gently without obligation. A few birds crossed the sky. They didn't call out. They didn't demand attention. They just moved from one piece of air to another, like she was doing in her own way. She couldn't picture herself. Not clearly. And strangely, that felt like peace. She didn't need to be seen to be real. She was here. That was enough. Her breath matched the tide. Inhale, rise, exhale, fall. The synchronization was unplanned. It just happened, like she had always belonged here. The silence wasn't around her anymore. It was inside now. It had settled in the spaces where thought used to rush. She didn't need to fill it. It didn't ask for anything. It was enough to just let it stay. The shoreline hadn't changed since she arrived, and maybe it never would. It was a landscape untouched by her presence, yet deeply welcoming. She didn't want to leave a mark. She just wanted to feel small in the best possible way. She hadn't gone missing. She had simply stepped outside the reach of expectation. There were no search parties here, no alarms sounding in the distance, and she was grateful for the quiet. She didn't think about the sea. It became her thinking. Its rhythm replaced her inner voice, and for once, her thoughts flowed without resistance. Time was no longer a line. It had become a fog soft, surrounding irrelevant. The difference between now and later blurred like footprints in the surf. There was no story she could tell anymore. No beginning to reference, no plot to hold. Her life had quieted into stillness, and stillness had no narrative. Each grain beneath her feet felt like a memory, scattered and soft. They didn't press upward with meaning. They just supported her lightly, like the past she no longer needed to carry. She was no one's deadline. No one waited for her at the other end of the horizon. And that freedom felt like oxygen. She stopped naming each breath. They came and went like waves now. No effort, no tracking, only flow. Her thoughts didn't disappear. They simply faded. Like footprints on damp sand, they softened until they were gone. And she didn't chase them. She hadn't spoken in hours? Or was it days? Her voice belonged to another version of herself now, and that version no longer needed her attention. Stillness didn't ask anything of her. It didn't require presence or clarity. It just let her be, exactly as she was. She wasn't her job. She wasn't her past. She wasn't even her name. She was just here, breathing, watching, floating. The sea didn't change, and somehow that made her feel safe. It was always itself, calm, wide, mysterious. Her thoughts used to race. Now they sat quietly beside her, as if they too had grown tired. Her eyes were open. Her steps continued. But inside, she was already asleep, cradled by rhythm, rocked by air. There was no metaphor here, no lesson waiting to be found. Just this moment, unshaped and soft. Worry needs a reason, and she had stopped collecting them. They slipped away like mist under morning light. Her shadow walked beside her, but even it seemed quieter, less certain, more like a memory than a reflection. The sky bent low above her, not with weight, but with warmth, as if to say, you don't need to go further. She wasn't measured by anything here, not progress, Not posture, not promise. She no longer stood out from the world. She melted into it, breath by breath. She imagined lying down on the tide, not to swim, not to sink, just to be held. Time used to loop, but now it only moved away, and she didn't follow. When had she started this walk? What had set her feet in motion? The answers faded like stars at sunrise. Stillness wasn't the silence before something. It was the silence that stayed. That was enough. There was no trail ahead, no path to stay on. She wasn't being led, and she wasn't lost. Her direction was breath. Her compass was stillness, and that was enough. There was light, but no sun in sight. Soft, diffused like memory. It didn't shine. It simply arrived and stayed. She walked inside it like a fog made of comfort. Dates belonged to calendars. Calendars belonged to walls. And she hadn't seen a wall in a very long time. Time no longer came in squares or schedules, only in the rhythm of water and breath. Even her footsteps didn't echo. The silence was too soft to bounce sound. Took in everything and gave nothing back. And that was a kindness. The past didn't run behind her. It had stopped a long time ago. And when she turned to look, there was nothing to fear. Only distance. Urgency had once ruled her. Now it felt like fiction. She couldn't recall the weight of it, only that it used to exist. She looked toward the horizon, but it no longer looked back. They were the same now, both wide, both silent, both without center. The wind came again, but it didn't remember her. It was not the same wind as before, and yet it felt familiar, like a story retold with different words. She no longer knew where her shoes were. Maybe she had left them behind. Maybe they had become the sand. She didn't miss them. The ground accepted her without them. She looked into the water, not to see herself, but to see if she still expected to. There was no reflection, just the ocean breathing back at her. There were no gusts, only a steady, thoughtful breeze, as if the earth itself was breathing beside her. She used to ask why. Now she didn't even ask what. Wonder had turned into watchfulness. Curiosity had softened into calm. She imagined someone asking for her story, but she couldn't give it a title. It didn't have chapters, only waves. The sea never closed behind her. It opened and remained open. It didn't seal her path. It just let her keep going. She could almost taste the air. It had no flavor, yet it satisfied, like the quiet between two words, or the pause before someone says your name and doesn't. Inhale, exhale. Not for control, not for grounding, just because it was the thing she did next. The sand never trapped her feet. It didn't try to slow her down. It simply supported and released. A lesson in softness. There was nothing left to justify, not to people, not to herself, and certainly not to the wind. There was no step count, no sense of distance. Her body moved, but her mind had already sat down. She realized she wasn't walking beside the sea. She was part of it, made of the same salt and silence. Clouds moved slowly above her. No shapes, no omens, just watching. She didn't need to know where she was. She didn't need to remember where she had been. She didn't need to explain any of it to anyone. She still had mass, but she no longer had weight. Everything that once pulled her down had floated away. It flowed past, like a river she never stepped into. It didn't count her breaths or ask her to hurry. The waves curled in as if leaning close, but not to interrupt, only to stay, not disappear, not escape, just slowly, kindly vanish. She wasn't being watched. She wasn't being tracked. She had stopped leaving footprints. Each one slipped through. She couldn't hold them. She didn't try. She kept waiting for an ending. But the sea didn't offer one. Only more space. It wasn't joy. It wasn't relief. It was just ease. A smile without a reason. Her feet moved without commands. They weren't part of her choices anymore. They just understood the pace of the world around them. There was no sunrise here, no sunset, just endless soft light that belonged to no hour. The sky had stopped tracking time. There was no beginning to her, no end, only movement between waves. She had become the in-between. The tide hummed a song with no tune, only rhythm, only sway, enough to lull 1,000 thoughts to sleep. The voice in her head had gone quiet. She no longer explained herself. She no longer named each feeling. She simply experienced. Not the clouds, not the air, not even herself. She was known by silence now. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her body learned to speak in stillness. It said all it needed by simply being. Thoughts passed by like seabirds, present, visible, but untouched. She didn't follow them. She let them glide away. The ground beneath her did not resist. It did not press upward. It held her like it had time to wait forever. The details of her life had scattered. Not lost, not erased, just no longer important. Like mist returning to the sea. The beach offered no signs, no warnings, only openness, only the invitation to keep going. She stopped existing in events. She became the space between them, the breath between two thoughts. She had edges once, boundaries, limits. Now she felt like a cloud, drifting in shape impossible to hold. Even the crashing waves softened. The sea spoke in hushes, like it too was getting sleepy. There had been one last question. She held it close for so long, but now she couldn't remember what it was. And that was her answer. Not a sharp thought, not a racing one, but a slow, wide thought that asked for nothing. Her eyes stayed open, but they weren't looking. They were just resting where the sea rested. The horizon had always waited. Now it simply was, and she no longer needed to reach it. If she had spoken, it would have sounded different. Lighter, wider, like the voice belonged to someone already asleep. Sound still existed, but she no longer processed it. It blended into breath. It joined the waves. She imagined her face lifting upward, not to be seen, but to vanish into the blue, to become something as large and undefined as the sky. She stopped dividing time into pieces. There were no frames to hold the moment. It simply existed, free and whole, not invisible, not hidden, but transparent, like truth that needed no explanation. She knew there was no reward, no finish line, only the continuation of presence. Even her thoughts slowed down. They no longer rushed. They exhaled with her. There was no sense in measuring, no step closer or further, only motion inside stillness. And she was grateful to not be remembered, to be accepted without a past. She didn't remember what she held, but she remembered the act of letting go. And she did. Before had become blurry, unnecessary. She no longer needed the beginning to appreciate now. And finally, the ocean wasn't beside her. It was inside her, a silence deep, endless, and kind. The silence inside her wasn't empty. It was full of soft things, unspoken comfort, unfinished thoughts, undisturbed peace. Day never really arrived. It unfolded slowly, like a yawn. She didn't wait for light. Came when it was ready. Each breath was long and kind. No rush to fill her lungs. No need to hold it in. She breathed like the earth did. There had once been a reason, but it had melted, like a letter soaked by the tide. Unread, unneeded. She should have been tired, but she wasn't. Her legs weren't walking anymore. They were just part of the sea's rhythm. She was still awake, but the air around her had already fallen asleep, and she moved through it gently. Thoughts began but didn't end. She let them trail off like footsteps behind her. Somewhere they dissolved quietly. She didn't aim for the horizon anymore. She was already part of it. Neither here nor there, just within. She didn't see her shadow anymore. Maybe it stayed behind, or maybe it had fallen asleep too. The waves didn't cheer her arrival. They didn't acknowledge her presence. They just kept moving, which was its own kind of welcome. Words lost their edges. Their meanings faded. Only feelings remained, and she didn't need to say them. The sky didn't offer signs. It didn't shift colors to mark a moment. stayed as it was, indifferent and kind. Every step used to feel like progress. Now each one just happened. She was no longer arriving. She was simply continuing. The breeze slowed down. It hovered, unsure if it needed to pass. It rested on her like a thought she didn't want to finish. She used to correct herself mid-step. Now she let her body lean, sway, and drift. It wasn't clumsy, it was peaceful. There was no other place. No urgency pulling her back. No memory asking her to return. She didn't say her name, but she felt its outline somewhere, like warmth without a source. The sea didn't care if she was wise or wrong. It didn't label her gentle or strong. It just let her walk beside it, judgment-free. Even the sand grew used to her steps. It no longer shifted dramatically. It welcomed her like someone returning home. She spoke nothing, and even if she did, it wouldn't echo. She had blended into the hush. Each step was less about now, more about remembering the idea of motion, a story she once lived. It wasn't performing. It wasn't impressing. It simply existed beside her, with her. She looked up, then forgot why. The sky answered nothing, but somehow it still helped. She wasn't carrying anything. Not weight, not purpose. Her hands finally got to rest. There were no requests from the world, no instructions, just air and time stretching quietly. Her body moved, but her awareness hovered just beneath thought, like the pause before sleep overtakes a dream. Stillness was no longer the opposite of motion. It was the destination, and she had arrived. It didn't invite her in. It didn't push her away. It just let her be part of its edge. The past had weight, but she had set it down somewhere long ago. Now she walked without timeline. Her thoughts were soft. Her skin felt soft. Even her memory had gone quiet. She was no longer resisting sleep. Silence wasn't just around her. It had moved in. It filled the spaces between her thoughts and between her heartbeats. The wind was still there, but she had stopped noticing. It had become part of her skin, like her breath. Every detail began to fade. Faces, names, moments, all slipping. Her story was not erased, just gently unwritten. Even the sand respected her rhythm. It no longer shifted in protest, only received. Soft, constant, still. Her body remained, but the idea of weight had vanished. She was lighter than memory, lighter than thought. She didn't focus. She didn't choose. Her mind became as wide as the tide, and just as quiet. Everywhere was here, and here was enough. Her feet no longer searched. They only accompanied her being. The clouds grew still. The color faded. Felt like the sky had gone to sleep too. No sound touched her, yet she felt everything, like listening with her skin, with her presence. For a moment, even the sea paused, not in fear, but in reverence. She paused with it. This might have been a dream, but she forgot to wake up, and the dream didn't mind. There was no switch, no sudden dark, just a kind dimming, a softness folding over the moment. It didn't echo, it didn't whisper, it had gone, and she was okay with that. There was no collapse, no vanishing horizon, only a gentle fade, like a candle slowly letting go. Not entered it, not watched it, merged, until there was no separation between her and now. It no longer wondered where she was. It had stopped counting. It accepted her exit. It was no longer sea. It was breath. It was rhythm. It was her. They laid down before her, folded into silence, and stayed there. She didn't lie down. She didn't resist. Her body simply followed the sleep her thoughts had found. Her outline faded. Her presence softened, and she melted into the sand. It didn't grieve. It didn't pause. She had become part of its presence. Not really. She had just changed shape, from presence to quiet, from name to nothing. It had one last chance to speak, but it chose not to, and that was the kindest goodbye. It wrapped the sky, settled into her breath. It blanketed the moment like dusk. It didn't come fast. It didn't ask permission. simply arrived, as natural as a sigh. She was no longer separate, no longer distinct. She was part of the everything now. No voice pulled her. No sound reached in. She was unreachable and free. She slipped through the edges of the world. And nothing cracked. Nothing called after. The waves grew slower. Their white caps vanished. The ocean, too, had gone to sleep. No sharp stop. No punctuation. Just a breath. And then nothing.